Dr. Elena Harper was wrapping up another long day at her private practice in New Haven when her phone buzzed on her desk. She considered ignoring it. It was already past 9 p.m., and she was exhausted. But something compelled her to answer. "Dr. Harper?" The voice on the other end was male, deep, and urgent. "Yes, this is Dr. Harper. How can I help you?" "This is Sheriff Marcus Reynolds from Brookhaven. My daughter Amanda has had a severe heart attack. The doctors here say they can't operate. They told me you're the only surgeon who can save her. Please, I'm begging you." Elena sat up, instantly alert. The desperation in his voice was palpable, and for a man in his position, a sheriff used to being in control of every situation, to plead like this, she knew it was serious. "Sheriff Reynolds," Elena said, her voice calm despite the urgency, "I need more details. What has the hospital done so far?" "They stabilized her, but she has a congenital heart defect, a septal defect, they called it. The lead doctor says she won't survive without surgery." His voice broke. "If you don't come, she'll die." "I'll leave immediately," Elena replied. "Send me all her medical records and the hospital address." Within minutes, Elena had packed her surgical tools and loaded her SUV. Flying wasn't an option. Brookhaven was a small, remote town, and there were no late-night flights or emergency transport services available. The drive would take about 4 hours, but it was the fastest way she could reach Amanda. As she sped down the quiet highway, Elena's thoughts raced. The medical records Sheriff Reynolds had sent revealed the complexity of Amanda's condition. A septal defect disrupted the normal flow of blood between the heart's chambers, causing dangerous arrhythmias. Without immediate intervention, the damage to her heart would be irreversible. Elena kept her focus on the road, but the weight of the responsibility ahead pressed down on her. Amanda was only 16, her whole life still ahead of her. Elena thought of Sheriff Reynolds' trembling voice on the phone. He wasn't just asking for a surgeon, he was pleading as a father desperate to save his child. The digital clock on her dashboard read 2:05 a.m. as she neared Brookhaven's outskirts. Elena could see the faint glow of the town's streetlights in the distance, and relief washed over her. She was almost there. Her relief was short-lived. Red and blue lights flashed in her rearview mirror, accompanied by the piercing wail of a siren. Elena frowned and slowed her car, pulling over to the side of the road. She had been driving at the speed limit, careful not to attract attention. There was no reason for her to be stopped. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car. One, a middle-aged man with a hard expression, approached her window, while the other hung back, his hand resting on the holstered weapon at his hip. "License and registration," the first officer barked. Elena handed over her documents. "Officer, I don't believe I violated any traffic laws," she said evenly. "Where are you headed in such a hurry?" the officer asked, his tone skeptical. "I'm Dr. Elena Harper, a heart surgeon," she replied. "I'm on my way to Brookhaven Hospital to operate on Amanda Reynolds. Sheriff Reynolds called me personally. His daughter's in critical condition." The officers exchanged a glance. Then, to her disbelief, the second officer scoffed. "The sheriff called you," he said, his voice dripping with doubt. "A black woman driving a car with New Haven plates, claiming to be a surgeon in the middle of the night? That's rich." Elena stiffened. She had encountered prejudice before, but not like this, not when every minute counted. "Call the sheriff if you don't believe me," she said firmly, "but please, let me pass. Every second matters." "We'll decide what matters," the first officer said coldly. "For all we know, you're smuggling something. Step out of the vehicle." Elena's heart pounded. The arrogance, the disbelief, it was suffocating. "Officers, I don't have time for this. A 16-year-old girl's life is at stake." "Watch your tone," the second officer barked, his hand gripping his weapon tighter. Elena swallowed her anger and reached for her phone. "I'm calling Sheriff Reynolds." He'll confirm everything. The first officer hesitated but then nodded. Go ahead. Let's see if this story of yours checks out. Elena pressed the sheriff's number, praying he would pick up. The phone barely rang twice before Sheriff Marcus Reynolds answered. Dr. Harper, are you close? His voice was anxious, taut with worry. Elena inhaled sharply. Sheriff, I've been stopped by 2 officers on the highway. They don't believe me, and I'm running out of time. Put one of them on the phone now. She extended the phone toward the older officer, her hand steady despite the tension radiating off him. It's Sheriff Reynolds. He wants to speak with you. The officer hesitated, his eyes narrowing as if trying to gauge whether this was some elaborate bluff. Finally, he snatched the phone. Hello? His tone was brusque, almost dismissive. Elena couldn't hear the sheriff's words, but the officer's demeanor changed in real time. His shoulders stiffened, and his eyes widened slightly. Yes, sir. I understand. No, sir, it won't happen again. He shot a glance at Elena, this time tinged with unease. When the call ended, he handed the phone back to her, his earlier arrogance replaced by a begrudging respect. You can go, he said stiffly. The younger officer, however, wasn't so quick to relent. Are we just supposed to take her word for it? He muttered, his tone still dripping with skepticism. Enough, the older officer snapped, his authority reasserting itself. Sheriff Reynolds vouched for her. Let her go. Elena didn't waste another second. She rolled up her window, started the car, and sped off, her hands trembling on the wheel. Relief battled with lingering frustration. The encounter had cost her precious time Amanda didn't have. The hospital came into view, its fluorescent lights glowing like a beacon in the pre-dawn darkness. Elena parked hastily and grabbed her bag before rushing inside. The emergency room was a flurry of activity, but one figure stood out, a tall man in a sheriff's uniform, pacing anxiously near the entrance. Dr. Harper. Marcus Reynolds called, striding toward her. His face was lined with exhaustion and fear. Thank God you're here. She's in the OR prep room. Elena nodded, already scanning the hallway for directions. Get me scrubbed in, she said, her tone clipped and professional. The urgency in her voice seemed to steady the sheriff. This way, he said, leading her through the maze of hallways. When they reached the OR, Elena immediately recognized the severity of the situation. Amanda was pale and unresponsive, her vital signs dangerously weak. A team of doctors and nurses surrounded her, their faces grim. Elena Harper, cardiothoracic surgeon, she introduced herself as she donned her surgical gown and gloves. What's the current status? The attending physician, a young man with tired eyes, glanced up. Ventricular fibrillation. We tried defibrillation twice, no sustained rhythm. Elena's chest tightened. Every second Amanda's heart remained unstable increased the likelihood of irreversible damage. Prep the bypass machine, she ordered. We'll need to stabilize her and perform an emergency repair of the defect. As the team moved to follow her instructions, Elena felt a flicker of hope. Despite the obstacles, despite the delays, she was here, and she would do everything in her power to save Amanda. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Elena's hands moved with precision, her mind laser-focused on the delicate task of repairing Amanda's heart. The room was tense but quiet, the only sounds the steady beep of monitors and the occasional directive from Elena. But as the surgery progressed, the reality became increasingly clear. The delay had caused more damage than anticipated. Amanda's heart struggled to sustain even the artificial support provided by the bypass machine. Come on, Amanda, Elena murmured under her breath, her voice barely audible beneath her mask. Stay with me. Suddenly, the monitor let out a shrill, continuous tone. Elena's heart sank as she looked at the flat line on the screen. No, 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 she barked, issuing orders to the team. Start compressions. Administer another dose of epinephrine. Charge the paddles to 200. The team worked furiously, but after several minutes, the attending physician gently placed a hand on her arm. "Dr. Harper," he said quietly, his voice heavy with resignation. Elena froze, staring at the motionless figure on the table. She felt the weight of every second she had lost on the road, every moment that could have made the difference. I need to call it," she said, her voice breaking. She checked the clock. Time of death, 4:07 a.m. Elena removed her gloves and gown, her steps heavy as she walked toward the waiting room. Sheriff Reynolds stood as soon as he saw her, his face a mixture of hope and dread. "She's gone," Elena said softly, her eyes filling with tears. "I'm so sorry." Reynolds staggered backward, his expression collapsing into grief. For a moment, he said nothing, just buried his face in his hands. But when he finally looked up, his sorrow was laced with anger. "What happened? You should have been here in time." Elena swallowed hard. "I was stopped by 2 of your officers on the highway. They delayed me for nearly 20 minutes. Reynolds' face darkened, his grief boiling over into fury. "They did what?" She nodded, her voice steady despite the storm in her chest. "I can't undo what's happened, but I'll help you hold them accountable. I have a camera in my car that recorded the entire encounter." Reynolds clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "This won't go unanswered." As he stormed out of the waiting room, Elena stood alone, the weight of the night crashing down on her. Sheriff Marcus Reynolds stormed into his office at the Brookhaven Police Department, his face a mask of barely contained rage. The grief of losing Amanda was still raw, cutting through him like a blade, but now it was joined by a burning need for justice. 2 of his officers, men he had trusted to protect and serve, had not only disrespected Dr. Elena Harper but had also contributed to the death of his daughter. "Get me Officers Grant and Miller," he barked at his deputy. The younger man hesitated, startled by the sheriff's uncharacteristic tone. "Sir, they're not on duty right now." "Then call them." "I want them here now." Within the hour, Officers Grant and Miller stood in front of Reynolds, their postures rigid but their expressions uncertain. Grant, the senior of the 2, tried to maintain his composure, while Miller shifted uneasily, his earlier bravado nowhere to be seen. "Explain to me," Reynolds began, his voice icy, "why you stopped Dr. Harper on the highway last night." Grant cleared his throat. "Sheriff, we had reason to believe she was suspicious. Late night, out-of-town plates, we were just doing our job." "Your job?" Reynolds' voice rose, his anger barely restrained. "Your job was to serve and protect, not harass someone on a baseless assumption." He slammed his fist on the desk, causing both officers to flinch. "She claimed to be a surgeon," Miller interjected, his tone defensive. "We couldn't just take her word for it. Did it occur to you to verify her story?" Reynolds shot back. "To pick up your radio and call me? Instead, you wasted 20 minutes that could have saved my daughter's life." The room fell silent, the weight of Reynolds' words sinking in. Grant looked down, while Miller's face turned pale. "Dr. Harper recorded the entire encounter," Reynolds continued, his voice low but filled with menace. "I've reviewed the footage myself. Your behavior was unprofessional, prejudiced, and completely unacceptable. Effective immediately, you are both suspended without pay, pending an internal investigation. Hand over your badges and firearms." "Sir," Grant started, but Reynolds cut him off with a glare that could melt steel. "Now." Reluctantly, the 2 officers removed their badges and holsters, placing them on Reynolds' desk. As they left the office, Reynolds leaned back in his chair, exhaling a long, shaky breath. The weight of his decision hung over him, but he knew it was the right one. Later that day, Reynolds held a meeting with his senior staff and legal advisors. He wanted more than disciplinary action, he wanted accountability. "We need to take this beyond an internal investigation," he said. "I want the footage from Dr. Harper's car reviewed and preserved. Prepare a formal complaint and contact the press. I'm going public with this." The room buzzed with murmurs of agreement and hesitation. One of his lieutenants, a seasoned officer named Helen Carter, spoke up. "Marcus, are you sure about this? Taking this public could cause a backlash, especially against the department." Reynolds met her gaze, his voice resolute. "I've lost my daughter. I won't lose my integrity. If the public loses faith in us because we failed to hold our own accountable, then we've already failed as an institution." The room fell silent again, this time with a shared understanding. By the next morning, the story had broken. Local news outlets ran headlines about the sheriff's bold decision to suspend 2 officers for racial profiling and dereliction of duty. Dr. Harper's footage was released, sparking outrage across Brookhaven. Community members organized a vigil for Amanda that night, turning their grief into a call for change. Hundreds gathered outside the police station, holding candles and signs that read, "Justice for Amanda," and "End Racial Profiling." Dr. Elena Harper stood among them, her presence both symbolic and deeply personal. When asked to speak, she hesitated at first, but the crowd's encouragement gave her the courage to step forward. "I came to Brookhaven to save a life," she began, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "But I was delayed, not by distance, not by traffic, but by prejudice. That delay cost Amanda Reynolds her life. This isn't just about me, or Amanda, or even Sheriff Reynolds. This is about all of us. If we don't confront injustice, we let it thrive. We can, and we must, do better." Her words were met with applause and calls for reform. The next day, Sheriff Reynolds held a press conference, standing in front of the Brookhaven Police Department. His uniform was crisp, his face solemn, but his voice was strong. "We, as law enforcement officers, are entrusted with the sacred duty of protecting all members of our community, regardless of race, gender, or background," he began. "When we fail in that duty, we must hold ourselves accountable. The actions of Officers Grant and Miller were a betrayal of that trust, and they will face the consequences. This is not just about Amanda or Dr. Harper, it's about ensuring that such failures never happen again." Behind him, Dr. Harper watched, her heart heavy with grief but also hope. Reynolds' words felt like a promise, not just to her, but to everyone. As the press conference ended, Reynolds approached Elena. "Thank you," he said quietly. "For what?" she asked, her voice filled with disbelief. "For reminding me what it means to fight for justice, even when it's hard." Elena nodded, her chest tightening with emotion. "And thank you for standing up. Amanda would be proud." In the weeks that followed Amanda Reynolds' tragic death, Brookhaven became a focal point for a growing national conversation about racial prejudice and systemic reform. The suspension of Officers Grant and Miller was just the beginning. Sheriff Marcus Reynolds, fueled by both his grief and a renewed sense of purpose, launched a series of reforms within the Brookhaven Police Department. One of the first changes was mandatory bias training for all officers, conducted by an independent organization. Sheriff Reynolds also established a civilian oversight board to review complaints against the police, ensuring transparency and accountability. These measures, while met with resistance from some within the department, were embraced by the community. "We're not just fixing what went wrong that night," Reynolds told his staff in a meeting. "We're building a system that ensures it doesn't happen again." Dr. Elena Harper returned to her work in New Haven, but Brookhaven and Amanda's story remained with her. She often found herself replaying the events of that night, the flashing lights in her rearview mirror, the mocking tones of the officers, the sterile silence of the operating room after she declared Amanda's time of death. Instead of letting the weight of those memories consume her, Elena channeled her energy into advocacy. She became a vocal supporter of police reform and often spoke at medical conferences about the intersection of healthcare, race, and justice. "I couldn't save Amanda," she said during one panel discussion, but if her story can prevent another loss, then her legacy lives on. Elena also stayed in touch with Marcus Reynolds. Their shared grief and determination to create change forged an unexpected friendship. Through their conversations, she learned more about Amanda, a bright, compassionate girl who had dreamed of becoming a doctor. She wanted to help people, like you do, Marcus said during one of their phone calls, his voice heavy but with a trace of pride. Elena smiled softly. Then I'll keep helping people for her, too. As the months turned into a year, the changes in Brookhaven began to show. The police department's reforms were yielding results: fewer complaints of misconduct, improved relationships with the community, and a renewed sense of trust. At a town hall meeting, residents openly expressed their gratitude for the sheriff's leadership. One woman, a mother of 2 teenage sons, spoke through tears. For the first time, I feel like my boys are seen and protected, not feared or targeted. Thank you, Sheriff Reynolds. The sheriff, humbled by the community's support, made it clear that the fight wasn't over. This is just the beginning, he said. We have more work to do. The annual vigil for Amanda became a tradition in Brookhaven. It wasn't just a time to mourn her loss but also to celebrate the change her memory had inspired. People lit candles and shared stories of how her legacy had touched their lives. Elena attended every year, standing quietly among the crowd, her presence a reminder of the night that had altered all their lives. On the 2nd anniversary of Amanda's death, Brookhaven unveiled a memorial bench in the park where she had loved to spend her afternoons. Inscribed on the bench was a simple message: in memory of Amanda Reynolds, a heart that inspired change. Elena was invited to speak at the ceremony. As she stood before the gathered crowd, she looked out at their faces, diverse, united, and filled with hope. Amanda's heart may have failed that night, but her spirit never did, Elena said, her voice steady but emotional. She brought us together. She reminded us that every life is precious, that every second counts. Let's honor her by continuing to fight for justice, fairness, and compassion. Her words were met with applause, but it was the silence that followed, a moment of collective reflection, that lingered longest. As Elena drove back to New Haven that evening, she couldn't help but think about how far they had all come since that fateful night. The pain of losing Amanda would never fully fade, but it had transformed into something greater, a catalyst for change, a beacon of hope. For Sheriff Marcus Reynolds, the fight continued. His department was now a model for reform, and his name had become synonymous with integrity and accountability. Yet every success was bittersweet, a reminder of the daughter he had lost and the price of complacency. For Dr. Elena Harper, the experience had deepened her resolve. She continued to save lives in the operating room while advocating for equity and justice outside of it. Her bond with Marcus remained a source of strength, a reminder that even in the face of tragedy, connection and compassion could prevail. Amanda's story had changed them all, and though her life was cut short, her impact would be felt for generations to come.